Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Right, today we are going to be talking about Mr. Negative, and I will showcase some gameplay footage as well from Realm Legends initially, kind of with his ideal rotation, and then a few more bits that he can do. We're not going to go over every single ability that he has and what he can do, but we're going to discuss the main mechanics of the champion. The most important thing is his light and dark energy there. And basically, every time you parry or convert a buff by dashing back, you gain light energy, and that is how you always start. Then you can convert your light energy into dark energy, either by holding heavy attack and evading opponent's basic attack with his inbuilt ability. He synergizes quite crazily good with Nick Fury Quake synergy, which kind of lets him double up on the energy charges that he would get, which we're going to see here in a minute, even though I only have 10. Actually, no, that is a problem of Mr. Negative as well. If opponent doesn't play aggressively into you, you might be stuck. But yeah, so you can convert your light energy into dark, either by performing an evade by charging heavy attack, or dropping level 1, which is something you don't often want to do because level 1 is relatively not as useful, but can make him very tanky, which is going to be something that we're going to look at later on in the fight. But the main bread and butter of Mr. Negative is his level 2. Now, with level 2, you can inflict up to 2 petrifies, 80% potency each, that last for a substantial amount of time, and that definitely is a very helpful utility kit. So you can reverse opponent's power gains and their regeneration. And I love those abilities, but at this point we do have quite a lot of champions who do that. Nonetheless, it is definite strong side of the champion. He's very good at reversing heals specifically. Right, and the second thing is last hit of your level 2 inflicts degeneration, and then additional degeneration for every single dark energy that you have. And you can basically get up to 20 or 21 degenerations on the opponent. That's meant to be kind of like your standard rotation. Now, level 3 is helpful. It bases the abilities on how many light and dark energy you have, and then you can like regenerate and deal damage to your opponent, but it is nowhere near as effective as the level 2. And all the people who have asked me recently, what do I think about Mr. Negative? The thing is, I want to like him more than I do. Or I should scratch that. I like him, but I don't think his successful implementation of design. Don't get me wrong, the idea behind Mr. Negative is brilliant. There are glimpses of brilliance in this champion's kit and some useful utility kit. But at the same time, when I need to describe this champion, I always go back to the same metaphor. As a champion, he would function like a story or a joke that has a brilliant setup, brilliant first act that pulls you in, that fascinates you, that grabs your attention. But the punchline is disappointing. And that is how I find playing Mr. Negative. The unique playstyle that I absolutely love. Individual kits of utility I can definitely see being useful, like immune to nullify, like being able to reverse regeneration, like inflicting degeneration, like being able to perform evades on demand, like having those evades count for intercepts, therefore synergizing with stuff like foresight nodes and things, or ebb and flow intercept. There are plenty individual elements to enjoy about this champion. The problem, however, is that it doesn't amount to anything worth doing, or rather in a more bigger, broader context, it just is not worth the hassle this playstyle takes. Now, there are 3 completely different ways how you can play Mr. Negative. Well, 2 negative playstyles of each other, and then a mix of both. You can play Mr. Negative by basically never dashing back, just like I did in the Winter Soldier fight, and that is kind of his max damage rotation. Then you can play Mr. Negative by never letting opponent touch you or parry, or having to parry or anything, by being able to always evade, which is something I'm going to show later, or just kind of like a mix of both. But ultimately, no matter which one you pick, neither one of those has nowhere near big enough of a payoff. Now, this is a 6-star rank 1 with Liquid Courage Double Edge Master is active with a perfect synergy setup, he was taking like 110, 120 hits to take down the opponents if everything went perfectly. So, not necessarily that it should be the deciding factor, but anything and everything he does in an environment where champions are in fact competing for our attention, for our catalysts, for our resources, for our signature stones, he doesn't come close to being the best option. He doesn't come close to being the best option that finds alternate openings. We have like Ghosts and whoever else. Doesn't come close to being the best champion that performs assisted intercepts. We have better champions than that. Even amount of degeneration that can be done, I believe him, and probably more can outdo him. And the playstyle is tricky and stressful. And I think that last several things definitely go at fault of developers. I think the champion with his kit would be perfectly viable should he would output better numbers and should he be made easier to play by significantly extending the duration of light energy, because once you go past 10 light energies, they start to expire, and it only takes 6 seconds for them to expire. 6 seconds is absolutely nothing. Especially because often you end up spending those 2 or 3 of those seconds waiting for opponent to recover from parry stun. Or launching a special attack. And even dark energy duration is better, but if you happen to push past 10 and you are nowhere near close to 2 bars of power, they're going to end up being wasted. All of the durations of those dark and light energy should either be extended or made permanent, in my opinion. And on top of that, he doesn't have any meaningful or significant ability to increase his damage, which is very bad. We can see level 2 crits for like 2k here, and this isn't like an Act 7 fight. The base damage is quite pathetic. Attack-wise, crit-wise, everything else. Only thing that he can do is gain a fury buff, 10% fury buff on his heavy attack. But that is purely symbolic fury. That is, what's the best way to describe? If you gain like 16 of those, I believe, or let's put it in a different aspect. If you gain 8 of those furies, you would get the same attack increase Purgatory gets, which is 80%. But it is impossible to gain 8 of them, because you will never be able to spam 8 heavy attacks quickly enough. So that Fury's duration, again, should be increased, and so should the damage increase, if he doesn't get any additional help. Those 3 things alone, increasing the duration or making permanent light and dark energy, and then on top of that, increasing the Fury duration, would actually make him a champion that is worth looking at, and that is worth investing in. The way he stands, again, there are definite things that he will be able to do. He's by no means a useless or a bad champion, but he reminds me, let's say, to a bit better version of perhaps Ebony Maw or maybe a Nihilus, where the offensive power is neutered by numbers, leaving the defensive power to kind of be the dominant force. And right now, if I look at Mr. Negative, the best case scenario I can see for him is to be somewhat annoying defender for mid to lower tiers, because in higher tiers, well, he has plenty of counters. He's a champion that once again has either gotten overbalanced or never received a proper worth fighting for number. Right, to showcase the fights themselves. Now, I'm using the playstyle where I don't have to let opponent parry me ever, which is kind of perfect for this destructive feedback node if you think about it. Every time I dex, I get a buff on myself, and then I can dash back again, and I convert that buff into light energy, and as long as I have at least 1 light energy, I can evade and punish opponent. It's kind of perfect like that. Very beautiful. And it's a brilliant element of a champion, but it's not good enough to make the champion work. You can go back to the previous fight, and I actually forgot to mention that his level 1 has a very potent ability, and that level 1 can make him very, very tanky with a huge block proficiency. And that block proficiency if I'm not mistaken, should interact with Limber. And if you have level 1 passive buff active on you, should be able to always have relatively long parry stun duration. So here I am going for level 1, which again does a relatively minuscule amount of damage. And now I'm going to be taking several hits on block on purpose in a moment. And we can see that even against 7.2 opponent, I will be taking relatively insignificant amount of damage in block. So he becomes, in fact, one of the tankiest champions in the game after throwing level 1. The problem is that if you don't throw your level 2s, your damage output goes from mediocre to pitiful. And the 6-star rank 1 with Suicide Mastery is active. The special one was critting for like what 1500, and here we saw like what 3k crit on a medium. The damage is just not there, and it's kind of the situation with Terex initially, where it doesn't really matter what kit you have if you don't do enough damage. Nobody's gonna play that champion. And Mr. Negative does barely enough damage in his optimal damage rotation. That's the situation that we have gotten with Mangog this year as well. He does acceptable damage if you forego all of his utility bits and only focus on a damage mode, on a damage rotation. And that's why I think Mr. Negative is again a story of what could have been, not what is. Because realistically, I do not see any reason at all whatsoever to give him any of my catalysts over She-Hulk, over Void, or whoever. Yes, there are neat things about him, but neat only gets you so far. Now, that being said, he's very, very cool, and at some point I might end up taking him to rank 2, probably no further, because he's so cool. He definitely is a champion that I want to, well, find better than he is. He's a champion that I want to mess around, I want to play with. His animations are cool, his abilities are cool, he looks insanely amazing. Unfortunately, he just is not quite good enough, which is a shame. Because, again, there are glimpses of brilliance. There are abilities that are unique and interesting. The playstyle is fascinating. But when it all comes together, it just doesn't amount to nearly enough, in my opinion. It's not worth to go over all the stress and clock watching playing him. It just isn't. That is what I think about Mr. Negative. Let me know what you guys think, and I shall catch you guys soon. See ya. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information